All right, hello everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Comic Book Radio. I'm your host Peter Cimetti, and this is episode 164. Can you believe it? 164 of these. Thank you guys for being here for all of them. RJ of the Island is my guest tonight. You might be familiar with his YouTube channel, The Fourth Age. We're going to be talking about breaking down storytelling concepts. And that's going to be a good talk with RJ because he knows what he's talking about. Before we bring him on, though, I want to say hello to those of you in the chat. We got John Henry chiming in early. So this is going to rock. Says, thank you, Peter. This was about 3 hours or so ago. Spicer McLeroy, what's up, Spicer? Thank you for joining us tonight. Yes, you will be learning about comics, and you're all out of bubblegum. All right. Charlie, what's up, Charlie? Says, hey, people, been waiting for this one for a long time. A lot of respect for RJ and Pete. Can't wait for my Crom to arrive when it's done and for the next King Cryptid. Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that. We got Vaz in the house. What's up? Abo Grizzly's here, too. What's up, Abo? Ronan, Mike Smith. How's it going, Mike? Hope you're doing well. We got Sark in the chat as well. What's up, Sark? And Michael Bancroft with that Bogan raid. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that very, very much. Thank you so much, my friend. Awesome One. What's up, Awesome One? We got 10-8 Comics here, too. What's up, 10-8? Jake Martin in the house as well. What's up, Jake? Yeah, Jose Canseco Bat. Tell me you didn't pay money for this. 10-8 Comics says Bogan's aboard. Gordon Goodbrothers here, too. What's up, Gordon? Wolf and Bear is in the house. How's it going, Wolf and Bear? Murph. What's up, Murph? I'm going to be talking to you soon, too. What's up? Silvar is here, too. How's it going, Silvar? We also have Michael in the house. What's up, Michael? Crazy intro. It's a good one, I guess, right? You like it? No? Yes? No? Maybe so? The Beam Pad. How's it going, Beam Pad? 10-8 says, DJ Pete, the host with the most. If you say so, my friend, your words, not mine. Dr. Mask. What's up, Doc? Hope you're doing well. All right, without further ado, let's bring him on. The man of the hour, RJ of the Island. What's up, RJ?
Not too much. I'm just sitting around talking comics, having some good old time this evening.
Wonderful. Sounds like a great day.
Yeah, well, I'm on the East Coast, so we got dumped on with snow, so I need a little bit of light to my day today.
I'm on the East Coast, too, yeah. Whereabouts are you, would you care to say?
I'm up north, so...
Up north, okay.
Yep.
In the Great White North?
Well, I move back and forth over the border every once in a while.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah, I'm in New Hampshire. So, sort of, kind of close. But depending where you are.
Yeah. Well, originally I'm from down near Boston, so that's where I hailed from originally.
Very nice. All right, man. Wow. Before we get started into tonight's topic, I just want to see where'd you kind of come across your very first comic, and how did it hit you? What was it about comics? Whether it's your first or your 10th or your 100th, whatever it was, which one was the one, if you can remember, that really hit you so hard that you were just in love with it?
Well, I have two older brothers, and they were always into comics, so comics were part of my life from the very first memories I can have, that I can remember. My oldest brother, actually, he had a good comic collection, what we thought was a good comic collection at the time, and I don't know where they all came from, but the one that I can remember out of his collection, because I was too young to even buy anything at that point, it was, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it was a Jack Kirby, Captain America. On the front cover, it's Captain America. He's in basically fighting a faux version of Steve Rogers. That to me sticks out as the first comic in my mind that I can remember. Even though back then, like for a long time, I was just talking to John and John's Longbox about this, that I couldn't read at that point. I remember not being able to read, and I was, delving into my brother's comic collection, and he at the time was collecting, of course, Jack Kirby, Captain America, and coming up after that was Frank Miller Daredevil, all these kinds of things. So to me, that's what I grew up on. And again, just talking to John about this, really trained my brain before I could even read to get stories out of the sequential art. But for me, when I became a comic buyer myself, because that took a little while, to me, the comic that I think is the greatest comic ever, that really changed my thinking about how storytelling should be done and how the apex of it is comics, was the ultimate, I guess we would say, the end of the arc of the Walter Simonson run on Thor, the
Oh,
Destroyer
okay,
book
yeah.
that he did. And that book was the first book he did the art, right up until that book. And then I think it was John or Sal Buscema who did the art for the Destroyer issue, which was the very first one that Walter Simonson didn't do. But it was the culmination of the entire arc. And to me, that is the greatest comic ever. And really, like I said, it just proved to me that this is the superior form of telling a story.
Oh yeah. Well, that run is a fantastic run. Simonson's Thor is definitive. Man, yeah, yeah. I got a bunch of those as well, and it's nothing like it. It's a great run. Classic storytelling. Just the whole thing. Every single thing about that. The dynamics of the art, the characterization and the development that Simonson was bringing to that universe at that point in time. It felt like to me, Thor was existing the same way that I view sometimes the X-Men within the Marvel universe, where it doesn't feel like they actually are in the Marvel universe, like they are in it, but they have a universe unto themselves. And it felt like Simonson's Thor was a lot like that, where it felt like he had his own thing going on completely. And maybe the Marvel banner was what he was under, but story-wise, it just felt like a whole different ball game a lot of the time.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing the script for Thomas Valiant, which is my first graphic novel. There were two series, excuse me, two series of books that I pulled out of my collection to try to glean from them the exact way to do great storytelling with comics. Number one would be John Byrne's X-Men. And that's the story element. But then I also went back to Walter Simonson's Thor with the artistic element, because things like the way he dealt with even sound effects was just masterfully done.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Now for you, in terms of the storytelling revolving around comic books specifically, what is it about comic book storytelling that you're drawn to?
Quite honestly, I did not notice this until I finished. Well, actually, not even finished, but was halfway into my first graphic novel, which is Thomas Valiant. But really, the beauty of it is the collaboration, if you ask me. For me to be able to write a script and then I was giving it to Renzo Rodriguez at that time, but to give it to him, and then he would take it and just up the level of what that story could do with the art. I mean, it's one thing to think that you have a story that is a beautiful story and you want to get out into the world, but then to give it to someone who has equal, if not superior talent to you, to them to turn it into sequential art and make that story even better than you made it yourself. That's a beautiful thing to do. And then it goes to the colorist, and the same thing happens. And if you have a really good letterer, the same thing happens as well. I remember the first pages I got back from Eric Weathers after he had lettered the first pages of that book for me. And not to be a marshmallow here, but I just about cried. That was so beautiful.
Seeing it come to life, right?
Exactly. And it's not only that it came to life, it was that each of these artists put their own mark on it to make a story I created originally better at every step. So to me, the collaboration is the beauty of making comics.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's been a handful maybe of people that could do it all, but largely they wouldn't even have got to that point if they didn't benefit from collaborative experience at some point within their career. And that really is, it truly is a collaborative medium. And I think it's one of those things where the sum of the parts makes a greater whole. So it makes the whole thing even better. You could be really talented and work with other talented people, but man, when you put it together and you gel, because that's the thing too. Is sometimes creators don't gel with each other, and then the product suffers, and then you wonder why. And it's like, these guys are so great. Why is the product so bad? Why is the story not working out? And sometimes there's factors involved, but more than likely, usually it's like ego gets in the way. But for creators that are talented to be able to put ego aside and just go, this is to the benefit of the story and the characters, and that's every decision we make is towards that. I think that's when you really get something special.
Definitely. I remember an interview that I read with Jack Kirby where he talks about how, for him, he says that comic books are an American art form. And to me, I just thought when I heard that, it's the fact that, and even though Kirby himself did so much, I mean, he would do the story and the art and put in word balloons on his own old art, which would then get copied over. But it's the egalitarian nature of American society that, nobody's above me, whoever me is, right? So you got a room full of people who are a room full of equals. And quite honestly, that's something I won't say that it diminishes, we'll say bande dessinée or something you would get in France or Belgium. But you can see in those kinds of things, it's a one-man show and it's their way or the highway. Whereas the American way to do it with an American comic book is you get a couple of guys together who are spectacularly, I don't know, artistic and know what they're doing and have a passion for it. And that is something that's not a competition. That is something, to me anyways, that's the American spirit. Everybody's pulling in the same direction to produce something beautiful. And that's what I think of when I hear Kirby in my mind about comic books being an American medium.
It's a team sport.
Yep.
You can't have, and the thing is, that's, you can have personalities where maybe they don't agree on some things, or maybe there's even sometimes they butt heads more often than not. But when you have the correct personality that can put that aside when it comes time to collaborate and make the thing work, achieve that goal, you can really achieve something great. And unfortunately, when you have that and it doesn't gel, it doesn't work out, it's too bad. But it really is a team sport when it comes to that. The teamwork makes the dream work, that kind of a thing. But it's fun to get involved with collaborators that can really elevate a project and a story. There's nothing like it.
And especially to have someone who can set their pride aside. I had to do that, well, because just in the book that I'm working on right now, which is the Valiant Heroes, which we're going to print really soon. I had Mike Gustovich, who I was just talking to, and John's Longbox. He was an old DC and Marvel great inker and penciler, and then he went and did his own stuff with Justice Machine and Cobalt Blue and all that. He did the pencils for 1/3 of the book of the Valiant Heroes, which is the rampaging Thor story. But I gave him, I mixed up the files that I was sending to him, and when I sent him the script, I sent him the incomplete script, and so he just did the best he could, thinking it was the complete script for the pencils for that book. And I looked at it, and instead of saying, okay, this is wrong, and even though I'm in the wrong here because I sent you something wrong, we're gonna have to redo these pages, I went, I'm going to have to rewrite this story so that my story makes sense with these new pages. Because his art was beautiful. There was absolutely, it was sequentially, Mike's stuff is amazing because he likes to blend stuff together. Like you have a page which kind of looks like a splash page, but it's really made up of 3 or 4 panels that blend together. So I had to figure out a way to just put my pride aside and say, no, this is not my story anymore. This is a collaboration that I have to retell the story for. And, that kind of stuff stretches your abilities to its max, and that's what pushes and makes art great. And I was thankful for actually getting to do that. So that's the kind of thing that really makes me excited about making comics.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So let's define storytelling right now to the best of our ability in terms of what makes a good story and what makes a bad story. For you, what makes a good story?
Well, I like to think of it as a reverse engineer. Um, if you have something that really moves you, and we've all read stories. For me, like quite literally, we were just talking about the Walter Simonson Thor run with the Destroyer arc. I remember going to the comic shop and buying that comic. I ran back because I was a kid, ran back to the car where because my mother was in at the shopping mall, and it was nighttime. I was underneath the car was underneath a very yellowish street light, and I sat there and read that comic, and I was just so excited. I mean, I was out of my skin excited to finish that comic. When I was just as excited to start it as I was to finish it, that moved me. And when stories can move like that, that is something where you know the story it just it's firing on all cylinders. So if you work backwards from there, and say that it has to have a connection. A great story has to have a connection, and your artist and your storyteller and everybody who's collaborating on that book needs to connect themselves to the reader through the story and each of those story elements. And as I'm always talking about on my channel, you got to concentrate on the reality, and not only just the reality around you, the physical reality that we live in. It has to be a reflection of that, so that, go back to ideas of Will Eisner, that we all share these ideas of reality, and you got to play upon those in order to get as I said, get the cylinders firing in the brain of the reader. And that's the thing. When you can take that kind of a story and do a reflection of reality in that way, and we're talking about superhero comics because that's mainly what I deal with, or fantasy, and you take that and you can twerk it and make it a little bit different because you have something fantastical in it. But if you focus on those things that will connect your storyteller to your reader through the reality of their existence, that is what storytelling really is. And that goes back to, as I'm always saying on my channel, goes back to Aristotle, 400
Oh
BC,
yeah.
talking about this is exactly how you tell a good story. This is the logical way to do it. I'm always about logic in the storytelling. And the evocation of emotion comes secondary to that because it needs to be there. But it's something that if you don't have that basis of being able to connect to your reader, as Will and Eisner would say, the trust between the artist and the reader, then they're not going to enjoy the story, and they're not going to get to that point of absolute excitement.
Yeah, that's how a story has resonance. That's how characters make an impact. You have to have that emotional connection. Even just the way that we learn through emotional imprinting. So if I were to tell you, can you remember, what was the best day in your life, and a very specific moment of what would make that day so great to you, and then I go, okay, what happened an hour after that moment? You'd be kind of struggling in some capacity. Most people, I believe, would. I certainly would. And it's because you have that emotional imprint of this happened, whether it was great or bad or whatever it was. And the same thing about characters and stories. It's that emotional connection. If you don't have that connection, you're not going to have that resonance. And I think that you really need that to have a story permeate and hit you in a way that makes you go, that was great. I gotta check out what's to come, and you get excited for it.
Definitely. And to me, again, those I was a story junkie when I was a kid. And like when I was growing up, we had like two channels. But by the time I was, I think, 12 or 13, we got a satellite dish, and we had, hundreds of channels at that point. And I was just watching, American movie classics and old black and white and old English RKO radio stuff, and delving into what was essentially the great stories throughout the history of all kinds of mediums, which would be television and radio and movies and everything like that. But the essential of those stories, again, was something that I saw reflected in comic books as well, and it always had that. It always has to have that impact, because if you're done with a book and you forget about it 2 seconds after you put it down, that was most probably a waste of your money. To me, if it touches you in that way that you will be thinking about it after you put that book down, that's how you capture an audience, and that's how you continue to, I don't know, provide for that audience a need for more stories to come, and that's the bread and butter of trying to get your stuff out into the world.
Absolutely. And a bigger insult, too, I find, anyway, for me. The money part can be frustrating when you read something or you purchase something, whatever it may be, and it felt like, you wasted your money on it. It just wasn't that good. But the time that I lose, that pisses me off more than anything. So the time that it robbed me of, you can't get that back. You can make back the couple bucks or whatever it is, but that time is gone forever. And that's the part that pisses me off when people go into it and they create something where they feel like, well, you're just supposed to partake because we made it. I mean, that's why you want it. We made this. So, it's there, and you're supposed to have it, and you're supposed to get it. No, you can't take people for granted on that level. I feel like that's taking advantage of humanity. And I know it seems like I'm being hyperbolic with it, but if you boil everything down, we only have so much time. So if we're going to be wasting it on things that the person is just kind of putting out a half-assed effort, they don't really care all that much. It's very apparent in what they're doing once you get your hands on it. It's infuriating, and coming back from that to go, okay, fine, well, that's what it is, and you got to move on, and that's how you have to do it. But that, to me, the time that type of stuff steals is horrible.
It's funny you should mention that, because you were just on Michael Bancroft's show, and to me, Michael Bancroft's show was the one of the first places where I went to see live streams of people being excited about their work. And that's what this new form of indie comics is really about, if you ask me. Because you have, I don't know what you would call it, but we'll call them mainstream indie comic producers, people who want to get into what is essentially the mainstream and are doing indie comics right now on that level. And they put out a book into the world, and you can just tell they're not excited about it. You can tell that, they don't put any effort into, selling it to other people, because they're not excited to have it out into the world. But on our end of this, with you and Michael Bancroft, and what I'm trying to do with my channel, and everybody else, John's Longbox, so many people, we talk about comics, and we talk about the stories that we want to tell. And there is an excitement in the voice of whoever is speaking about this comic that they're trying to produce. And that is the key to the difference between what you have in mainstream and what you have with the comics that we are producing. It's because we have this excitement for it that, at the very absolute minimum, that you're going into something that was an exciting adventure to create. So there's definitely a possibility there's an exciting adventure for you to read it. And so it won't be a waste of your time. To me, the excitement in the voice of the creators is an indication that this is not going to be a waste of my time.
Oh yeah, yeah. The thing is too is when you're putting in that time and that energy, you're putting in your soul into your work. That's a lot of your time. That's a commitment there to what you're making and what you're creating. And so if you're going to put all of that time into that, and you're not excited about it, you're not really caring whether or not people are aware of it. You don't really talk about it. You don't really want to share it. You should be kind of just brimming with, almost trying to hold yourself back from spoiling this for people. That's how excited you are to talk about this and share this with others. And those kinds of creators that are really excited about it, it gets me excited for their work, and it gets me interested to see what are they up to, what are they doing. And even if that particular story that they're making right at this moment doesn't appeal to me, it leaves an imprint on me that this is someone who really cares about what they're doing. I'm going to pay attention to see what they're doing in the future, because maybe they'll have something that does appeal to me. But that's the kind of thing that you're 100% correct. It really, that is a tool, if not one of the biggest advantages that someone has as an independent creator, is the ability to really go out there and be excited about what they're doing and communicate that to people. Whereas on the corporate level, a lot of the time they're actually discouraged from talking about it in such a way. Even if they are truly excited about it, they don't want the creator to kind of send the message across about certain things or whatever it may be that may not be the way the corporation wants to promote or talk about this specific kind of a thing. And it really kills, I think, the energy and the soul of that kind of project. But the independent that can get excited about it and really bring that, that's important. And that's, I think, an advantage.
Definitely. And I know that every time I get back a batch of pages, I'm working on Crom the Destroyer right now, and Nick Axe and Jim O'Reilly are doing the art for that. Whenever I get pages back from them, I just have to, I have to restrain myself from putting them out into the world because they're so beautiful. They're amazing pieces of art, and you have to be judicious in what you share with people. But the fact that I want everyone to see this right now is to me saying that this art is worthy of the money that people are spending on this book. And that's something, again, that excitement is there with Renzo as well. He's doing so much of the art for my Valiant Heroes and Thomas Valiant books, and we're working on Thomas Valiant #2 right now. Renzo is someone who is so excited to actually work on a project because he loves superheroes. He doesn't get to do superheroes a whole lot, but the excitement, he can just barely contain himself with the excitement that he exudes, not only when you speak to him, but when he just pours it into the art. And to me, again, that's the kind of people I want to work with. That's the kind of people that draw in an audience. And that's the kind of people who are going to give you a product that you're going to be happy that you laid down your time and your money to get this piece of art.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of analyzing stories, both in concept and in execution, for you, when you're creating your stories, what is it that you have come up against where you felt like it was difficult for you? This was a tricky situation here. You wanted to tell it to a maximum effect that would really play out well with the story, but you didn't quite know how to handle that. How did you kind of get through that, and what was that like for you?
Well, quite honestly, the book I was just talking about a few minutes ago with the Rampaging Thor, that was the most difficult thing I have done so far with comic books, to rewrite that script so that it was basically done in a Marvel method where I gave a sketch to Mike, although I was supposed to give him a full script, and he went and did his own thing with the art. And so I had to rewrite the dialogue and make sure everything fit into the story as it was. To me, that was stretching me to my limits. That was extremely difficult, but extremely rewarding. But here's the thing that I love as being a writer with comics. I always, for my personal life and really for writing in general, I try to take limitations and turn them into a positive. And to me, that is one of the positive things of writing comics. You only have a certain amount of pages that you're going to be able to actually put into this book, and every page, to me anyways, I usually do a maximum of about 9 panels per page. That's a maximum. Sometimes if you have tiny little panels, you might get outside that. So I know how many panels basically I can put on a page, how many pages I have. To me, that primes the pump for everything that I'm going to do to write the story, and it makes it so much easier as a writer. Quite honestly, a blank page used to fill me with dread, but it doesn't anymore, because all I do to start is to write my outline of how the panels on the page will go. And once I start that, everything else flows from that. So to me, again, those limitations of the storytelling for sequential art to fit the art in, so that you don't have, again, little things like the fact that you can't have word balloons that are going to crowd out all your art.
Yep.
All of those limitations, to me, that's the bread and butter of um, how to overcome anything that comes up within trying to tell a comic story.
It forces you to do your best to make the best decision possible,
Exactly.
because
'Cause
you do
I
have that.
remember. Yeah, I was just going to say that I've written a novel manuscript before this, and it was like 400 pages long, and I worked with different editors. We cut it down to 200 pages, and you edit and you edit and you edit over and over again. But for comics, it's you edit right away. It's
Yeah.
I get back the art from my artist after I've put out this story and given them this script, and I have to rewrite it. I always rewrite the dialogue after I get the art to make sure that it fits with the
Yeah,
panels
same
and everything
here.
else.
Yep.
But that is self-editing, and that's you saying, like, to me, used to be my editor when I was dealing with manuscripts. It was you got to take out this line here, this line here, this line here. But now I do it to myself. It's like, what is the exact essential that I can get in here so that I'm not crowding out this beautiful art? And that self-editing process is something that really, again, is the beauty of art. It distills everything down to its essence.
Oh yeah, and that's so important to do that, to be able to communicate that story effectively and condense that to the vital parts. And sometimes the vital part is also the pacing. So the pacing's involved, and you have to put something in there that maybe will slow the pacing down a bit, so the reader can really focus and zero in emotionally on this scene that's taking place. And then sometimes it quickens the pacing, so that something can feel like, wow, that's really just happening so fast. But it's not necessarily happening fast. It's just because the pacing is being rushed with the amount of panels and whatever is occurring within them. But it's kind of an illusion that takes place, and that's such an effective tool to use as a storyteller making a comic.
Yeah, definitely. My stories are very rapid, and I try to keep them that way. I always, well, so far, anyways, with the 3, 4 graphic novels now that I've started, anyways, and I have other manuscripts that I'm working on. We always start with a bang. If you have Thomas Valiant #1, it starts in the beginning of a major battle between two superhero groups. Crom the Destroyer is it's an actual battle on a battlefield. Things like that, and each of the stories for the Valiant Heroes, again, you start with a bang, and then you usually, after you get your first scene out of the way, which, if it's one of the larger graphic novels, which I do, which is about 80 pages, the end of the first chapter, then I slow things down and give the reader enough of a pacing change, and then start to rev things back up again until you get to your ultimate conclusion, which is the crescendo of your story near the end. So yeah, the pacing for comics is something that is extremely important. I always go back to, like, the Will Eisner school and his idea that I don't always follow, but to me, is really, I think, a rule that should be followed most of the time, which is to say that you can't have more than one exchange per panel. So if character A says something and then character B responds to it, you can't then have character A respond to character B's response, because that's two moments in time instead of one moment in time, and your panel is one moment in time. So to me, that keeps the pacing going. That keeps the flow of your story moving along at a very steady clip. And that's, for my writing, anyways. I'm very long-winded, but when I see the art, again, I condense everything down to, okay, get this moving as fast as possible, because you got to get the reader's attention to move faster and slower at certain times. So that, again, one of the beautiful things about comic art and about comics in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that it's really helpful too for people to envision it as a roller coaster ride. That first drop is the momentum that needs to carry you throughout the rest of the story. And sure, you're going to have these little ups and downs throughout the rest of it, but that first page or two is going to really be the thing that kicks off the whole story. And if you're doing it where the first page or two are just a snooze fest, it's going to be all that much more difficult to get that momentum where you need to be that maybe you're on page 4 or 5, and now your big drop comes that takes you through the rest of it. And then sometimes there's comics I've read and other various kinds of stories too where it feels like that big drop never comes, and it's a plateau. You're just strolling along on that roller coaster, and it's very difficult to become invested in it when it's like that. But yeah, I really find that the comics work great when sometimes you do a build up and then that big drop, or you do right from the top and the big drop, and then it takes you throughout the rest of the story.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people always ask me is, will you ever do anything with public domain characters? And I don't really see myself using public domain characters so much because I already use a very what I don't know if anyone else uses this technique, but my technique is the fact that I try to give you, and a lot of people say, you're just copying X, Y, and Z. And I would go, yes, I'm giving you exactly something that is going to trigger in your mind. This character looks like that character I already know. Therefore, you don't have to tell a giant backstory at the beginning of the book in order for the reader to begin to immerse themselves within the story. Therefore, I can start at an action scene. And so, for Crom the Destroyer, again, people are going to look at page 1 and go, this is a Conan book. I know it's a Conan book because it's based upon a Conan-like character. Therefore, I have that e- e- that in my mind equal to a Conan book. Therefore, I as the author don't have to spell out exactly what this character is about. That will be done naturally through the flow of the actions and the adventure. And for Thomas Valiant, again, you have my main character, which is Thomas Valiant. He's very much in the vein of Mr. Fantastic or Plastic Man, although he has certain different qualities. But all of those characters are like that. You can say, okay, I know from 2 panels what this character is supposed to be like, and then I can immerse myself in the action. And after they've immersed themselves in the action, then they can see how this character is dislike what they have in their mind, and it starts to grow as an independent thing and an independent story, which is different from your mental picture of what you think about these characters. So that's my technique of using really what I call it's a visual head start for all of my readers, for them to be able to jump right into the action.
Now, doing something like that, do you find that it forces you to be more creative or less creative?
Well, here's the thing. I always let me put it this way. When I started Thomas Valley #1, which was my first book for a graphic novel that I put out, I've always, as a kid, I always wanted to write Marvel and DC characters. So I said to myself, okay, and this is where the world that I created really came from. It's something like the amalgam universe where they took Marvel and DC and smashed them together. So I said, okay, for each of these characters, I'm going to take a Marvel character and a DC character, and I'm going to smash them together, and it's going to have powers of one or the look of the other. So we'll start from that beginning point and then move forward. And really, it's this is what I tend to do for storytelling itself. Even when I did novel manuscripts that I was trying to sell, what I would usually do is I would take a story that I loved but ended poorly, in my opinion. I would rewrite the ending for that story in my own words, and then when I rewrote the ending, I would say, okay, it would work much better if the beginning was slightly different here, there, and the other place. And that's what I do with a lot of my stories. I begin with someone else's story, I retell the ending, and then I retell the beginning, and it becomes an entirely new thing. So to me, it's not a limitation at all. It's something that allows me to be extremely creative with a minimum of having to, tell giant loads of backstory so that you can understand what's going on.
Do you worry about visually in terms of the character design, the silhouette, that type of a thing? Do you worry about anything like that in terms of not being maybe unique enough or standing out or standing apart from the things that you're kind of being inspired by?
I don't think that, after what do we got, almost 80 years or more of comic books, and before that pulp magazines and everything else, I quite honestly am of the opinion you're not going to be able to tell a unique story. You're just not going to be able to. So you're going to have to tell something that you're going to see in other places. And people all the time say to me, okay, you're just ripping off X, Y, and Z. And they say that to me like it's an insult. Well, to me, that's an homage. That to me, that's saying, okay, yes, if you can see that to begin with, then you can begin to understand the story before I've even told the story. And then I can get into how I would change it and how you can see this world through my eyes or this character through my eyes. Because for Crown the Destroyer, you know, for me, anyways, a lot of people don't like my take on Conan because they don't think it's where Conan should be. A lot of people say he's an anti-hero. I say no, no, he's a hero. To me, Conan is a hero. Why? Because he ends up as a lawful good king who will give his life for his subjects, and he's tried so many times by his enemies to break him away from and to abandon his people, and he never will. So the story of Conan the Barbarian is a story of a man becoming a hero, because that's the end, because Robert E. Howard wrote Conan as a king before he wrote any of the other stories, because he wrote them at a sequence. So to me, a lot of people don't like my interpretation of Conan because they have their own interpretation. And I would say, fine, you can have your own interpretation, but this is my interpretation of that character. Therefore, when I create a similar character, that's the vein I'm going to go in. And so it does allow for creativity in a way, again, that gives you a flavor of a character that you already know, but allows me to be creative in my own right and create something entirely new. Because again, well, everybody sees the world in their own way through their own lenses of their experiences. So that colors how you're going to create a story. And as long as you are attracted to the way the author is looking at the world, and so many people, I don't know why, but are attracted to the way I look at the world and the ideas of heroes, that it's a beautiful thing for me to tell a story and have people actually excited to read it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to look at it in terms of adversity doesn't create character, it reveals it. So when you're creating these situations with heroes and whatnot, you're putting them in a situation that reveals who they are at their inner core. And I know at the time it may feel like, well, because you're making the story, you're creating this atmosphere. But the thing is, if you're a really good storyteller, you understand that this character has this within them. How do we bring that out? It doesn't just come out. Now, they can choose a variety of choices, and for it to resonate like it's a real, living, breathing individual, that adversity is going to reveal their character, not necessarily turn them into something they otherwise maybe not would have been. And I think that's an important aspect of storytelling.
And definitely, that's what I always go back to. I've said it many times on my channel. I can't remember the exact quote. It's how does it go? It's a biblical quote, basically saying that um, adversity builds character, and it goes on from there. But that's exactly what you're describing, and exactly what I tried to do at the same time. And that's what I did with Thomas Valiant #1, was the fact that I took these characters, and again, you're starting in a world where you're presented with people who are supposed to be heroes, but they're not really, because they haven't gone through a struggle that you have been able to see. So you have these characters that, again, are supposed to be heroes, but then really the story of Thomas Valiant #1 is our quote unquote heroes getting pounded on time after time after time, and just because of small mistakes that they make, going through the ringer until they get to the end. And that suffering until they get to the very end of the book, that's revealing that, okay, now at the end, now you can consider yourself a hero. Now you can even just begin to consider yourself a hero. So that's the kind of story that I like to tell. But you're exactly right. Suffering builds character.
Yeah. And in terms of a hero and a villain, on what terms do you define both?
Well, again, I always go back to the Aristotelian idea of the fact that it goes back to virtue, versus vice, which is, your hero is a paragon of virtue, your villain is a paragon of vice. But to put it in more simplistic terms, it's the fact that when you have someone who is pounded on by life, by reality, by whatever circumstances they get themselves into, your hero is going to get back up, and your villain is going to stay there in the dirt and blame other people for being there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a victimhood mentality with the villain. They are forever the victim, and they lash out because of it. And doesn't mean that the hero is never a victim of anything, but they don't live within that mindset. Their attitude is different towards the things and the wrongs that they have been imposed upon them. It's interesting because we see a lot of this play out throughout history. We see a lot of it play out in modern times as well. And it's odd, but quite coincidental, if not confluential, in terms of what we're seeing with modern storytelling, giving you an ambiguous villain that is full of victimhood, and you're kind of supposed to have sympathy for them. You're almost kind of supposed to relate to them more than you're supposed to relate to the virtuous hero who's self-sacrificing and going through various things and trying to come out on top of it, struggling through the adversity, as opposed to the villain that is embracing the adversity in a very harmful way to themselves and others. For 1 second, why do you think we're seeing this kind of thing mirror within society and within a lot of storytelling right now, where we're having an embracing of victimhood?
Because the alternative is to embrace suffering. And if you want to be a hero, if you want to be a good person, you need to embrace suffering. You just have to. We live in a world of suffering. It's just the way that it is. I know people don't like my attitude when I say that, but I go back to like Augustine of Hippo in the 4th century AD.
Well,
He talks about how,
it's a very Joseph Campbell kind of mentality too with that.
yeah, but I really think that because uh, I don't want to get too deep into other strains of thought, but what is it? Benedict XVI said, "People crave comfort, but we are not built for comfort. We were built for greatness." And that's the kind of mentality that defines the difference between a hero and a villain. People who want to play the victim are the people who want nothing but comfort, but we don't live in a world of comfort. No matter how comfortable you can make yourself, there's always going to be something that's going to be suffering for you, and at the end of the day, everybody dies. So you got to look that square in the face and say, this is a world of suffering. Do something with it instead of blaming other people for it. And really, as you were saying about the difference between a hero and a villain, the difference between people who cry victimhood as opposed to someone who is heroic. Again, it goes back to it's for Western civilization, really. It's all strained through the ideas of Augustine of Hippo from the 4th century AD, because he redefined the idea of will, what it means to have a will for person, to make a choice, because before that was a very ancient Greek way of thinking, which was controlled by fate or destiny. But he gave it as Augustine gave it a very Christian tinge to it, saying, no, it's your choice. Down at the end of the day, it's not something else that's forcing you to make this choice. It's your choice. And it's that choice, whether or not you turn towards the light or the darkness when you come across something that's going to get in your way. That's the definition between a good person and a bad person, between a hero and a villain. And I remember there's like a morality class that I was in at one point, talking about the fact that, let's say you have two brothers, they're twins, and they both go to, let's say, a soup kitchen and volunteer their time. But one goes there because he wants to help people. The other goes there because he wants to look good, because he's vain. You have two people doing the exact same thing at the exact same time in the exact same way, but one of them's doing good and the other one's not. it's that will. What is your will? What is your choice? Why do you choose to do this? And the people with the victim mentality say, I don't have a choice. This is me being trampled over by the
Yeah,
world.
life is imposed upon me,
Yep.
and yeah,
And that's what you see within the stories right now. That's why, like I did probably 4 years ago, I covered a Marvel podcast where they talked about the four next great writers for Marvel, and they all talked about how they like to write heroes, or like to write villains rather than heroes, because they said they didn't like heroes. Heroes were in this box, whereas villains were so free and were able to do everything that they would want to do. And I'm shaking my head when I actually listened to them give that idea. But that's the idea of modern storytelling in so many mediums right now. It's the fact that the villain is actually the one who you should have more sympathy for than the hero, because the hero is so-called close-minded, whereas the villain can do whatever he wants. And that's not a way that someone can actually be a person who takes responsibility for their own choices. That's a mentality of victimhood. That's a mentality of woe is me, I'll cry, pity me, pity me. And that's what we see in storytelling. That's why I want to, with all of my stories, go back to the idea of a true hero, someone who makes that choice to be heroic.
well, because within that structure, you're also then going to view the good-natured hero, the self-sacrificing hero, as well. That is who they are. They have also no choice, so they're not choosing to be good. They are a victim of fate, the same way that the person who is claiming victimhood is also a victim of fate. They just got the raw end of the deal. So whatever they do is in response to the cards they were dealt, and that's that. And the person who's doing good, it's not out of any kind of sense of virtue or any kind of decision that they've chosen to make. They are also playing a part within what fate wants them to do. And that is I think, a very dangerous kind of concept to just even put out there, in terms of having that mentality pervade people. Now, you could play that up interestingly within a story if you want, but the fact that we're seeing a lot of that, I think, out in the real world and reflected in the story, and it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing at this point, because these mentalities have always kind of existed and they've always been around, but they weren't at least as seemingly pervasive as they are right now. At least I don't feel that they were. But it's interesting to see, because once you have someone, I think, feeling that they can't do anything to better themselves, they are a victim. Man, what a position. Someone in power could look at that, manipulate that, and play that like crazy. And that is a very dangerous thing, to take that and remove that agency, that power that people have to make their own decisions and carve their own path, regardless of what's been imposed upon them. That's a tremendous amount of power to give to an individual, to say, no, you, at the end of the day, you do have the power of choice, and you have the power to actually live your life in some capacity in which you want to live it. And your decisions are yours. And to remove that, that is quite the thing.
Definitely. And the importance of story on top of all of that, it really just played out in my life over the last about 6-8 months, because I found myself becoming fairly negative about a whole lot of things. And I tried to think to myself, why in the world am I being so negative now? And I really got back to the idea of, well, it's because I haven't been reading that many stories. It's because I haven't had time to read and to really immerse myself in stories. I've been consuming a lot of media, but it's just, short things that it's a recap of a story, this or that and the other thing. But to surround yourself like I used to, and I'm trying to do once again, with heroic stories, to see people make that heroic choice, that gives you the positive mentality that, yeah, I can make a choice that is going to affect my where I'm going to go in life. I don't like to call it destiny, because I don't believe in destiny, but it's going to affect what the world around me is going to look like. And it is, again, that's the beauty and the importance of story. And it's what I grew up with. I'm sure you grew up with as well. Reading stories like that in comic books inspired so many of us to live a better life, and that's what we need to get back to. Have a I don't know what you'd call it, because the media that you see around you is in the opposite direction right now. It's saying no, cry, pity me, and just wallow in your
Yeah,
ineffectual
fear,
nature.
uncertainty,
Yep,
distrust. Yeah.
exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I never really got into what is it, cosmic horror, because cosmic horror is based upon the idea of basically a nihilistic, um, everything's going to come to a bad end and you don't have any real control over this to begin with. To me, I was like, no, I don't believe that. I never believed that. I believe that my choices have an ultimate end, and that I can make some impact on where I'm going to go in life, and really to surround yourself. First of all, if you can surround yourself with people like that, great. That's the best thing to do. But if you need to fill up other gaps in your life where you're by yourself, to fill that up with stories of that heroic nature where the triumphant will get someone to be better. That is, again, what our culture is missing right now, and that's part of what I'm trying to provide. Only not only for myself in creating it, but for the generation right now who doesn't have that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very different landscape than it was even 30 years ago in terms of the approach to storytelling and the positive message within these stories. It's a very different landscape now. It really feels like before you could have a story that was full of conflict. There was some negativity in it because there was characters bringing this conflict, but the story still had this heart of positivity because of this message that was essentially about the fact that yes, there's going to be bad things that occur. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be evil. These things exist in the world. These people, they do these types of things. But it doesn't mean you just roll over and let that stuff happen to you and let it happen to those you care about or the world you love and the world you care about. It means that you have a decision. You can do that, pretend like all the bad stuff is going to win and what's the point? Or you can go, you know what? We can fight or we can preserve our way of life, and we can, because that's ultimately, right, what we're talking about in terms of evil winning is literally all you got to do is nothing. If you just give in, that's it. It's over. And that's what they want. That whoever wants to impose their will upon you, especially in an evil kind of way, in a bad way, harmful, they just need you to not care anymore. If you stop caring, they've won. So as long as you care, it is that much more difficult to have that play out. And to get people to do that, to get them to just go, what's the point? Be apathetic. They won anyway. That's the whole point. That's the whole game right there. So all you got to do is go, you know what? No, they're not going to win. I'm going to do this. We're going to live life this way. It's going to be a positive message that we put forward. That, I think, is the importance, big time, of storytelling and all of these kinds of things with heroes.
And I think that goes right back to what we started this conversation talking about, is the fact that if you have these apathetic people, there's no way you can connect to them in that way that makes them excited. You can't, unless you are really spectacular and break through their apathy. There's no way you can tell a truly exciting story to them. To them, a story and entertainment in any kind of story vein is just a way to fill up their time. It's not something to make them excited. It's not something that's going to touch them. It's not something that's going to inspire them. And really, I think that's the ultimate form of telling a story and connecting with your audience, is that your audience draws inspiration from what you have written, what you have drawn. And that's the exact opposite of apathy.
100%. Man, RJ, thank you so much for being here tonight, man. Before you go, before you wrap things up, where can they find you?
They can find me at my YouTube channel, which is The Fourth Age. We talk usually on the weekend about current events and storytelling and heroes, and then I do streams on Wednesdays, either with John's Longbox or on my channel. You can also find me on Twitter at RJ of the Island, and I have right now two Indiegogo campaigns up. One for the Valiant Heroes and one for Crom Destroyer. Both of those books can be ordered. We're still in production for both of them. Valiant Heroes is about to be printed to ship, and Crom the Destroyer is still about halfway done. So those are all the places that you can reach me.
All right, wonderful. I've got a couple links in the description of the show for RJ's YouTube channel, The Fourth Age, and also for the website for Thomas Valiant. You guys could go check that out. And other than that, Alterna's got a campaign. We got 12 days left, 63% raised so far. So we're getting closer and closer to the goal, but time is a ticking. So if you guys want to check that out, 4 new comics: Blood Realm number 14, Horace H. Hoover number 3 of 5, Unit 44 number 9, and Unit 44 number 10. If you enjoy dark fantasy, epics, strange offbeat adventures, and bumbling, dim-witted duos in sci-fi, horror, and mystery kind of adventures, check those books out. Great books. They're on both Indiegogo and on the Alterna site. The link is right there, alternacomics.com/funding. As for that, I'm going to be back here on Friday with Mike Murphy at 9 o'clock Eastern, and tomorrow I'll be on Statistical Zero's channel at 8 o'clock Eastern. Hope to see you guys there. RJ, again, thank you so much for your time and for the conversation. This was great tonight.
Thank you very much for letting me come on.
No problem, man. Anytime. And everybody in the chat, thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for your comments and just being awesome. You guys are always great every single time. Much appreciated. All right, guys, have a great night and an even better tomorrow. I'll see you guys soon. All the best.